What's up everyone, Chris coming to you from Salty Island Games, and this week, it's Crusade time. So I'm here today to take you through the process of starting your own Crusade, whether it be for a local league, or you just want to forge your own narrative. I do think that the Crusade rules are a great way to do that. Now, what's not so great here is the way that GW laid out this section of the book, but that's why you're here now, and if you want, you can go ahead and follow along with this video. Once you see someone do this once, you won't have any problems doing it a second time, or more, depending on how many armies you've collected over the years. So let's go ahead and just dive right into it. Alright, so a few things that you should have before you get ready. First one, something to show the power level for your army. Crusade does run off the power level system, so you're going to want something, the codex, as long as you have the appropriate GW power level update that they just posted online. You can use the GW app as long as you have the paid subscription. You can use Combat Roster, which you can find on the Warhammer community site, and last I checked they did update the power level on that. And lastly, you can use Battlescribe. Battlescribe's free, we've all been using it for years. The one thing to go ahead and double check is that the Battlescribe has updated to the most recent power level update. Second, you're going to want something to record your Crusade Force on, whether that be something like the battle journal that GW put out. You can just use fillable online PDFs. You can print some of those PDF out. You can make your own book of grudges. Whatever it is that you want to record your combat roster. Third, you're going to want the 40k rulebook. So I'm going to go ahead and reference the pages that you'll be reading as we go along. I'm not going to tell you that this video will replace the book, so go ahead and read your rules. Lastly, you're going to want your codex, plus any supplement books. Remember that this is a narrative system, so things like the specialist attachments, for example, are going to be legal. Alright, step 2, I'm going to forge that narrative. So starting on page 306 of the core rulebook are the Crusade campaign rules, and I'm just going to go ahead and walk you through it and put together my Crusade Force at the same time. So first, it's going to tell you to pick a faction. This is pretty straightforward. Just write the faction of your force. So you've got Imperial, Chaos, Eldari, Tyranid, Orcs, Necrons, and Tau. I myself will be doing a Thousand Suns force, so obviously for me, that's going to be Chaos. One thing to note is that you can mix within your faction. This is narrative, so forge whatever story you want. If you want like a Nurgle themed army with demons and Death Guard, or maybe you want an Inquisitor-led Imperial war host looking to purge the galaxy of heretics. Whatever it is you want, it's your story. Now, on that note, I'm going to caution you on the opposite side here. Once you start playing games, all of the normal rules of the game still apply. And that means you're going to want your faction bonuses, and that means you're going to want to stick within your factions when building a detachment. So, even though in your combat roster for your Crusade, you can have things like Sisters and Space Marines in the same combat roster, once you start filling out your detachments, you're going to need to have sufficient number of the correct units with the correct keywords to properly build a Battleforge army. So obviously while this does let you get creative, it does not let you break the core rules of playing the game. Next up is Order of Battle. So let's get to the good stuff. Order of Battle is the pool of units in your Crusade force. And in Crusade, you don't necessarily have to field every unit in your force in every single game. This is just the available units that your general has access to. Order of Battle begins at 50 power level. Basically what this represents is the amount of resources that your Crusade has. And as you play more games, you can increase this as you go along, letting you have more options, play bigger games. But in the beginning, your resources are starting out at 50. Don't worry, the size of your force will grow pretty fast, or as slow, as you want, as you'll be seeing as we go along. One thing that I do want to add here is that you don't have to spend all 50 power level. It is not a use it or lose it system. You'll always have this 50 power level available, so you might want to bank a few points in preparation for expanding and buying that high value heavy support unit. Or maybe you're brand new to the game and you want to build your Crusade as you build your collection. All good either way. Another thing to note is that you can add and remove units between games freely. There's no penalty for doing this. If you discard a unit, then the power level that they used up will obviously get refunded back to the pool as being available for a different unit. This represents basically the unit no longer using up the resources to maintain a battle-ready condition. Now, there is a downside to this. Obviously, as you play a lot of games, your units will gain XP, and if you discard a unit, any XP that unit has gained, as well as any special rules or relics, get discarded along with it. In the beginning, that's not really that big of a problem, but later on in your crusade, a unit with a lot of experience really will be much more valuable and could potentially even be called a veteran of the Long War. Now, we're going to go ahead to page 307. They're going to throw a couple of rules at you here, but at this point, the only one to pay attention to is requisition points. We're now going to skip ahead to page 314. And if you've built any sort of 40k list in the past, the order that I'm doing this in will feel much more natural to you than trying to read the book and do it in whatever order GW has tried to lay out. If you're new, trust me, this way works better, so just follow along. So the first thing you're going to do is take some kind of a marker, dice, counter, pen and paper, whatever. Make a note that you have 5 requisition points. You get that for free right now at the start of creating this force. There's a couple of things that requisition points can be used for, but the nice is all of them cost 1 requisition point each. The first 2 that are most likely going to be used all the time is 1 requisition point gets you a relic, 1 requisition point gets you a warlord trait. A relic and a warlord trait are not free like they are in the normal game. You do need to pay a requisition point each time you give a character a relic, and each time you give your character a warlord trait. Every character obviously can get 1 of each. You do not need to use the stratagem if you want to give a second character the relic or the warlord trait. You're pretty much free, as long as it's a character, to give them a relic or a warlord trait, as long as you have appropriate requisition points. But don't go too crazy yet, just handing out relics and warlord traits to everyone. First things first, named characters do not get to purchase a relic or a warlord trait. Now, these named characters like Armon or Magnus or Mortarion or Guilliman, these characters naturally will come with their own gear, including their own relics. So that's what they come with. You don't get to change it. Second is, in the appropriate codex, these named characters also get assigned a warlord trait. So you do get the assigned warlord trait for free, but you don't get to have any choices on that. Basically, what this represents is the named characters have already forged their own story. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a named character accompany you on your crusade, but these named characters are who they are. In addition, they will never gain experience or upgrades. These characters are ancient, historic, and heroic figures, and honestly, 1 or 2 crusades really means nothing to them in the history of their legacy. But with that said, they might be willing to lend you their aid, but at what cost is up to you to tell in your story. In addition to the relics and the warlord traits, you can also spend requisition on a couple more things. For now, I'm only going to go over the ones that you'll use at the start of creating your crusade. On page 316, there is a big list, but the ones of importance are: first, you can spend 1 requisition point to increase the power level of your crusade by 5. Second is 1 requisition point for the rule Specialist Reinforcements. And lastly, 1 requisition point for the rule Fresh Recruits. Now, Specialist Reinforcements, there are some stratagems that you can purchase at the start of the game that upgrade units. The best example I can think of is Space Marines have a stratagem to upgrade a captain to a chapter master. Now, in Crusade mode, you cannot use command points at the start of the game to upgrade units. Now, instead, you'll be spending requisition points. You spend 1 requisition point for each command point cost of the stratagem. So, for example, with the Space Marine example, upgrading a captain to a chapter master normally costs you 2 command points at the start of the game. So here in the Crusade, you will spend 2 requisition points, and that will permanently activate the stratagem and upgrade the captain permanently into chapter master status. Now, the other upside obviously is that you won't need to spend these command points at the start of the game, so that's pretty awesome. Obviously, all of those same rules do apply. For example, with the captain to chapter master, it does say in the stratagem that you can only use this if a chapter master is not already present. Space Marine chapters only have 1 chapter master. Makes sense. This is a narrative system. Something else that I want to make a note of at this point is anytime you spend requisition points, this is permanent, be it giving a relic, giving a warlord trait, making a use it larger, or making someone a chapter master. So no takebacks. If you discard the unit that you spend requisition points on, then the points and the upgrades are discarded along with the unit. So do make sure you use your resources wisely. Speaking of using resources, things like relics and warlord traits are unique. So you can't just go around handing out the same relic to all the characters in your army. That's not how relics work. Likewise, warlord traits are also unique. Technically, these specialist reinforcements are not restricted in this way unless the stratagem you're playing specifies it like the chapter master does. And that's it. That's all you really need to get your Crusade rolling. And if you want to see what I'm going to put together, keep watching, or you can just go ahead and skip to the end to see the final result, or just keep playing this as background noise while you put together your own Crusade Force. As incentive to keep watching, I'm going to go ahead and give a few more tips along the way as I build my list and talk about the narrative and maybe some lore along the way as well. Either way, get to crusading. So send me your Crusade factions in the email below. Let me see what other people are putting together. Tell me about the force that you're putting together. I love the lore, and I'm really excited to see what other people put together for their armies. Okay, so you're still here. So let's go crusading. So I'm going to go ahead and put together my great love, my Thousand Suns Crusade. I started collecting Thousand Suns back in 3rd edition, and then I sold that army. And then back in 7th edition, with the re-release of Thousand Suns, I got back into collecting them again, and I've been painting and building this army ever since. I have not painted nearly as much models as 2 editions of collecting would imply. But the models that I do have painted are already painted up in the scheme of the sect of the Red Echo. Now, the Red Echo Warband is notably led by the sorcerer Dedophet, and I apologize if I mispronounced that. If I am, I'm going to butcher it the rest of this video. What is known about the Warband is that the Warband is constantly followed by eerie harmonies. It's argued whether the harmonies are made up of the songs of old Prospero or maybe the lingering screams of their victims. What is known also is that the Warband does follow the cult of knowledge, and so obviously I'm going to go with that as well and pick that as my cult. So I've got no complaints really about that. It gives me access to the psychic power Psychic Delve, which is, I believe, similar to the Elder power Doom. It also gives me access to the Warlord trait Ardent Scholar, which lets me reroll dice rolls of 1 during psychic tests. The relic could be better, could be worse. Luckily, this Thousand Suns already have access to some really good relics, so I'm not super worried about that. For me, when I start building a list, I always start at the top. It might also just be a chaos thing. So HQs, here we go. One little trick is when you play the Crusade campaign, chances are you are probably going to be playing a game or 2 at the Combat Patrol level or 25 power level. So one thing that I'm going to do while I build this is to make sure that I build in a solid 25 power level list within this pool and then add some units around it to give flexibility as my games vary in power level. We've played a couple of power level games, found it actually to be really fun, and it's a much better reflection of the game than like playing on a 4x4 table back in the day at 50 or 500 points. The missions are really well written. I definitely recommend giving it a try. Another benefit is if you're an experienced player, you can get a power level game done in an hour or less, like no problem. So first up, Dedophet himself. Obviously he's an exalted sorcerer, so 6 power level. I had an old Armon model, and I really wanted to use it in my army even though I have the new Armon. Obviously I don't need two of the same character, so I used it as a base and kit bashed it with parts from the Exalted Sorcerer kit. In addition, I'm going to go ahead and spend 1 requisition point to give him the Warlord trait Ardent Scholar. Before anybody complains and I get some hate mail, yeah, I know, Ardent Scholar is not the best Warlord trait in the army. For Thousand Suns, I'd probably give that to either High Magister or Otherworldly Presence. However, at some point I do want to have Armon join my Crusade, so he will come with Otherworldly Presence, and as I mentioned earlier, you can't double up on Warlord traits, so I'm going to keep that one on the side for him. As for High Magister, yeah, it is technically better. For those who don't know, High Magister is +1 to casting. However, fluff-wise, I like the idea that Didofit is using the Warlord trait from the Cult of Knowledge, so it's more just a fluff narrative thing for me. Besides, I'm playing Chaos, I'm going to have a lot of HQ characters. I'm sure I'm going to give that one to someone eventually. As far as equipment goes, Force Staff, Plasma Pistol, I feel like that's pretty standard. I'm also going to go ahead and spend the requisition point for Helm of the Third Eye. That's the regen command points relic. For me, I do tend to spend command points pretty quickly, so anything extra is going to be pretty welcome for me. Lastly, as far as psychic powers, I'm going to give him Death Hex and Prescience. Again, I feel that's pretty much pretty common psychic powers to use. So that's 2 out of the 5 requisition points have also already been spent up. Alright, next is I'm going to play Combat Patrol at some point, so I better have some troops. Basic unit of 5 Rubric Marines, 6 power level. So since this is Crusade, you're also going to have to record how the unit is equipped. And in the future, unless you spend requisition points, then you can't change the equipment. It is 1 requisition point in the future to change up the equipment in any way you want. So for now, I'm just going to go with the pretty standard 4 Infernal Bolt Guns, Aspiring Sorcerer with Force Staff and Plasma Pistol, and the Aspiring Sorcerer will get Weaver of Fates. Fast attack, I am going to start with a unit of 6 Zangor Enlighten, so that will increase the power level to 6 as well. Finally, heavy support. I am actually going to go with this model just because I like the way it looks. So 7 power level for the Mutalith Vortex Beast. And that's that. That is the starting 25 power level list. I've got a few other things that I'm going to go ahead and add in. Mostly I'm just going to go ahead and add in models that I already have painted. So first up, I've got a second Rubric squad. This time I'm going with 4 Warp Flamers. It is a bit of a weird unit, but I have had some fun using it in the past. Stuff them in a Rhino, drive it on up, jump out, 4 Warp Flamers to the face, hilarious. So on that note, also going to go ahead and put a Rhino into the pool as well. As far as the Sorcerer on the Rubric squad, I'm going to give this one Glamour, probably Glamour. Since the entire unit is assault weapons, they'll pretty much be getting up close, probably advancing, and probably just getting up in people's face, so that's pretty good. Another unit that I love and I have painted up is Scarab Occult Terminators. And also there has been some leaks that Terminators might be going to 3 wounds, so may as well put some in the Crusade. I'm going to give the Psychic Power Doombolt here, in case I need to snipe something out, but really this is the unit that I most often find using these Cult of Knowledge power Psychic Delve to reroll 1s to wound. Especially when you combine that with Combi Infernal Bolters, then doing the double shoot stratagem Infernal Fulisade. Lastly, I'm going to also stick a Zangor Shaman on disc. Psychic Power, I'm going to give him Glamour here also, but more important, the reason that I like this unit is I'm going to spend 1 requisition point and give him the relic Dark Matter Crystal. I personally like it on the Shaman, as it gives him, the disc gives him some good mobility to get around and pull a unit out of combat if I really need to. Also, once he uses the crystal, I don't mind seeing him as a little expendable. And so that's that. 50 power level spent. So that's a bit of narrative time. Didofit is an ancient sorcerer from the time of the Horus Heresy. he was one of the sorcerers who aided Armon as well in casting the now infamous rubric of Armon, which means he was also subsequently banished from the planet of sorcerers upon the completion of that. However, when Armon struck his deal with Magnus, he was recruited by Armon and returned with his thrall band to aid in the attack on Fenris. So now that Magnus has reunited the Legion, he pretty much is in kind of a bit of an awkward situation. Obviously, he pledges his loyalty to the Legion, and is very much aware that the protection afforded to him by Armon's goodwill is very precarious. Magnus obviously also has still not forgotten the day the rubric turned the Legion to dust, so he does not have that going for him as well. So for now, Didofit pretty much has to gather his strength, prove his value to his Primarch, prove his loyalty to Armon, and somewhere in between all this, find the power that he needs to basically tell them both to go shove it and let him be free again. And that's that. Hope you've enjoyed following along, and I hope that this helped you guys be able to put together your Crusade Force. Like I said, send me an email, let me know what you're putting together, send me some pictures of your force. Looking forward to getting in some games with people in the future, and otherwise, be safe, and see you guys later.